Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breaking Bad Careers, a live AMA brought to you by Your Career Strategy. Your Career Strategy is myself, Eli Beaumont, and international career coach and executive coach, Peter Hill.
Hey, everybody.
How you feeling tonight, Peter?
I'm feeling great. Today, actually, we're in different time zones. So I know it's late, a little bit later for you on the East Coast. I'm here in hometown, beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, and it's middle of the day, 1 p.m. As you can see, the sun's out. So how could I not be doing well?
That's awesome. And I'm based here in the greater New York City area. It's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard, and we're really pumped to help support anyone who's joining us on this live stream in answering questions as it relates to breaking bad careers, right? I'll speak for myself. I have a variety of clients that I'm actively working with right now, and they just happen to be a little bit worn down by this year. This year has proven to be quite challenging for a lot of people. I mean, I myself was laid off back in April due to the pandemic, and that's just one out of the other 50 million or so individuals around the United States alone that were laid off from their roles. So this year has been proven to be quite challenging, a little bit demotivating, but I've also found it to be a little bit inspiring, and people have been taking a lot of time to really dig into this pause period to figure out, what the heck do I want to do and where do I want to go from here? I don't know if you've been noticing the same thing, Peter.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the great pause, right? 2020. You had a career transition. I also had a career transition. I've been super blessed to work with some amazing clients. And, for sure, it's been difficult for some people. And, part of our work as career coaches, kind of overlaps with some mindset type of coaching, helping people stay, in a powerful state, stay optimistic, use the dumpster fire of 2020 as a springboard to 2021. And, it's okay to reflect on, how 2020 went and some of the challenges. But this really is a great opportunity. I mean, we're heading into the holidays. Before you know it, we're going to be heading into Q1 of 2021. And it's a perfect time. Now more than ever is the perfect time to take all these extra hours that we all have during the holidays that we spend time with friends and family, and we do our shopping and all of that. But it's a fantastic time just to reset and reflect on what we want, reflect on ourselves, set ourselves up for success in 2021, whether we're currently employed or whether we're in career transition. This is a golden opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree, Peter. So before we get started, Peter and I are going to do some very short self-introductions, just so you know who the heck is chatting with you here. But before we do so, we'd like to ask you all to just think about any questions that are burning as it relates to your own careers, questions that you've had in mind for quite some time over the course of the last 8 months. And, Peter and I have been fortunate enough to work with tens of thousands of individuals over the course of our coaching careers thus far. And I think we've learned a thing or two, and we may be able to provide some insights here that could support you in getting the answers you're looking for as it relates to these particular questions. So my name is Eli Beaumont. As I mentioned earlier, I am an international career coach. I've probably been coaching for the last 7 years, but I started my career in management consulting. I like to say that I am a bit of a recovering consultant. After I realized that career wasn't for me, I took a huge step back and nearly a 60% reduction in pay to take a role in sales and business development while I start to build up my coaching practice, which is really what aligns with what I want to do. So I did that for a while. I found myself in London. That's where Peter and I came to meet, and was working as a career advisor and also a part-time career coach and doing some transformational coaching. So it was super interesting to just kind of immerse myself fully to the point where I was coaching 2,500 hours per year. And that's a lot of time spent with people one-on-one, helping them and supporting them and figuring out what to do. But at the end of every day, I was energized, right? And after that, I found my way back to New York City. I took an awesome job as a director of career coaching at the Flatiron School, which is a subsidiary of, or was a subsidiary of WeWork. And I got to manage a team of 100 career coaches, and we supported about 3,500 students who were 18 to 60 years old, who are looking to upskill and transition careers into software engineering, data science, UX, UI design. And we supported in landing a 92% placement rate year over year, right? So that's awesome. After my stint there, I was let go back in April, and Peter and I connected, and we know that a lot of time is spent focusing on how do I get this next job? How do I improve my resume? How do I get my cover letter looking fresh? When really the real questions we need to be asking are, who am I? What energizes me? What are my values? And how do I find a company that aligns with those? So with that in mind, we created Your Career Strategy, and Peter and I have been tag teaming it, and it's kind of led to fun projects like this, Breaking Bad Careers. So Peter, how about intro for yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Peter Hill. I'm also an international career coach. Eli and I met in London, where we were both working at Holt International Business School. We were supporting undergraduate students. We were supporting graduate students. I was also overseeing the executive MBA program for some of our more seasoned MBA students. I've been in this career coaching space kind of officially since 1999, unofficially a bit longer than that through some of my early work in adult education. I typically deliver my expertise across a couple of platforms. So for the past decade or so, the platform was higher education, where, as I mentioned, Holt International Business School. I spent 9 years at Holt, working across 3 different campuses and being based in 3 different cities. I was in Shanghai, China. I was in London in the UK. I also spent about 1.5 years in the Boston campus. As part of that journey, I was able to not only work one-on-one with thousands of Holt students, but also kind of oversee the career programming, all of the workshops, the seminars, the career education, dabbling a bit in the corporate relations side and helping the school build some corporate relationships, right? So that was about 9 years of the past 10. And then I spent the most recent 1 year at the University of California in San Diego. And then earlier in 2020, this year, I decided to move on, and I've returned to private practice. And I say returned because prior to getting into higher education, I was self-employed as a career coach since 1999 here in Hawaii, where I am from. And also I took my private practice to Shanghai, China. And that's where, I kind of cross paths with higher education, right? So love what I do for a living. Nothing gets me out of bed quicker than the opportunity to work one-on-one with somebody who would like to take their career to the next level. And what we're seeing in 2020 is that what that looks like is typically getting unstuck.
Yeah.
It's almost as simple as that. It's getting unstuck, and there are lots of blockers. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they aren't. But it's about getting unstuck. And as I mentioned in my earlier comments, right now is the perfect time to take that self-reflective period and set yourself up for success in 2021. And if that means part of it's getting unstuck, let's get you unstuck. And that's part of why we're here today.
Great. So regardless of where you're joining us from, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, you can just go ahead and post your questions, and we'll be able to see them. And as they come in, we'll start answering them. Peter, I see one that we had received earlier was how long are job searches taking these days, right? It's a challenging question considering the ambiguity of the environment that we're in. But I'm curious to hear what you've been seeing.
So I literally just had this exact question come to me this morning. I was on a discovery call with a prospective client, and I was asked, how long should these things take? This particular prospective client was at a very senior level, looking for a VP of marketing and communications types of roles. And so my response to her was, well, at a more senior level, like what you're looking for, anywhere from 6 months to a year, even non-COVID, right? 6 months to a year is not uncommon for somebody who's more senior, right? For somebody who's more junior, say you're fresh out of undergraduate, fresh out of B school, a 4 to 6 months is reasonable, but it also depends, how much effort did you put in while you were in school? If you're waiting until graduation, then yes, it'll take 4 to 6 months for sure, is what we see. So I think the things to keep in mind are, what level of accountability are you at? If you're more senior, you can expect it to take longer in general anyway. If you're more junior, you could probably gain traction a little bit earlier. But here we are in 2020, and we are seeing things take longer. That is just the way it is. We all have to kind of accept that and realize that dynamic is a little bit beyond our control, right? So what can we do? The more important question is, what can we do that's within our control to make sure that in my job search, not the average job search out there, but in my job search, what can I do to accelerate things? And there's so many things that we can focus on, that we can control, that can accelerate things despite market conditions.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, Peter. And, just a different perspective on it, right? Like, I'll share like a few client anecdotes here. So I've worked with a variety of clients, some who've been proactive in choosing to make a career transition during this pandemic, and others who didn't really have a choice. They were laid off, right? And they were told that they need to find something else. They were given maybe like a 1 to 2 month severance, and they had that pause period of 2 months without having to worry too much, and before they got on unemployment and had to deal with reduced general income on a weekly and monthly basis. So what I found consistently is the effort in and the time put in always correlates with a faster result, right? So every single time I have clients who say like, hey, I'm willing to put in, an hour a day. Right? I'm like, okay, an hour a day. We're looking at like probably if I had to do a correlation, probably a 6 month job search at an hour a day versus the clients that I have worked with that I've seen land jobs in about, I'd say 70 days is the average for a few clients who've been able to put in about 20 to 30 hours per week, right? They literally treat job seeking as if it's their full-time job, or let's call it a part-time job, right? Technically. But the more time that they were able to invest in, the more they were able to source leads, get interviews, meet with different people, find positions of interest, and find roles and opportunities that weren't being advertised, right? And through that, and through the relationships that they were able to build through the time invested, they started to see this almost immediate snowball effect of interview, like informational interview, introduction to somebody else, introduction to somebody else. That introduction led to another interview for like an opportunity. While they were getting that, they got a call in for another interview. The first one didn't go through, but then they got a call back for another one. They kept their pipeline full. And because that pipeline was full, they were able to have multiple options, even during a pandemic, right? These are people who are job seeking between the months of March to now. So, and that's another thing. Even when I was working at the Flatiron School, we're supporting tons and tons of students actively job seeking. And we continue to see the students who are willing to do the work, who are willing to invest time in their portfolio, who are willing to show value added projects and tools and be able to showcase that to prospective employers that they were interested in. They were the ones getting hired. And just because we're in a down economy and a pandemic doesn't mean that people aren't being hired. It's more saturation, and you really need to differentiate yourself better. But if you're able to do those things, then you stand a better chance at landing those jobs much quicker than the 4 to 6 month timeline or longer that the typical individual or job seeker is experiencing right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm absolutely seeing my clients also gaining traction quicker. I think it's partially because I give them a lot of homework and I keep them focused on the process, right? And knowing, having faith that the outcome will come, right? So yes, I mean, we're seeing progress in the market as well. I think there's some kind of key characteristics of the types of individuals that are successful even in a down market. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but some of the characteristics I see are, one is proactivity, right? The other, I think, is, which is critically important, and I kind of hinted to it earlier, but focusing on what we can control.
Yeah.
Right. We can't control what's going on with the economy. We can't control all of the chaos around what's going on politically, particularly in the U.S., but that also has an international impact. But obsessing over those types of things that we can't control is counterproductive to a fruitful job search. So focusing on what you can control, right? Your personal branding, your preparation, how many hours a week, to your point, how many hours a week are you putting in to your effort, like genuine, true, productive, proactive work, right? Into your job search. All of these things positively impact the outcomes.
Man, and we have a question that plays into this really well. So the question is, employers aren't really responding to my applications. Is it because of the COVID situation, or maybe it's something I'm doing? They're looking for clarity to help understand. So,
crystal ball, magic crystal ball question.
Yeah, and then we have Evan Dudley, who says, "Are job postings a place to start?"
Shall I tackle that one?
Why don't you chime in, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Sure. So I'll answer the last question first, and then I'll kind of transition into the larger question of why aren't employers responding to me during COVID. So I think it was Evan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Evan and everybody else, for your benefit, online applications may or may not be a good place to start. What I always suggest is to keep in mind, the 4 basic interview generation techniques, right? So applying for openings is only one of the 4. Another one could be using a search firm or executive search firm. Here in the US, that's typically for more senior people, but for those of you who are international, I think it's country specific. For example, when I was living and working in China, it was interesting to see that even more junior roles were being headhunted, and search firms were being used even for more junior roles. So it's kind of geographic specific, but search firms is a channel to land interviews. And then the other would be referral networking. And I think, most of us who have been in a job search, who have done any research at all, have learned that kind of networking is the best way to find a job. That's kind of the main tagline that's thrown out there. And, generally speaking, that's true, but we need to drill down a bit deeper into that to understand exactly what that means in terms of behaviors, right? And then the last way would be direct contact, right? And that's essentially, if you think about like sales, it's kind of cold calling your prospects, right? But this is the kind of thing that can be fruitful if you approach it with the right strategy and the right communications. So our experience, and I know Eli can vouch for this as well, but our experience is that it's the latter two, right? The referral networking and the direct contact, where we see our clients gaining more traction in general. And you also see a bit of research out there on the internet which validates this. I think there was a study at Harvard. I think I saw something recently in another business school. It might have been, for some reason, Washington comes to mind, either George Washington or University of Washington or Washington State. There was a study there around their students and where they were gaining traction, right? And it validates what Eli and I have come to learn, that it's the referrals, it's the relationship development where the magic really happens. Whereas the executive search firms and the online applications tend to gain less traction. Now, that's kind of the general data, but we're also the first ones to say, try all four techniques, right? Make sure your branding's in place, make sure everything's updated and your resume's in place and you're crystal clear on the value that you have to offer to your target markets. And then try all four, understanding the data, but trying all four and seeing what kind of feedback you're getting. Okay, and so if you get all of those ducks in a row and you're doing online applications and you're finding that you're gaining a lot of traction through your online applications, then yes, do more of it, right? And we do have success stories of people who find success that way. And in general, yes, you will find a job eventually that way, but is it the most effective and most efficient, meaning the fastest? That's questionable.
Yeah, and just some numbers to throw out at you, right? So I have some friends who are recruiters over at Amazon and TikTok right now. And they've been posting lots of job opportunities because those companies were actively growing during the pandemic. And what they were seeing is where they typically have about like 200 to 300 applications per role, they were seeing that number jump to 2,000 to 3,000 applications per role. And what that's doing is it's flooding the applicant tracking system. And what's happening there is typically, you know, the recruiter might get some eyes on your resume, maybe if you have the right keywords and stuff in there, if you're going through these online job portals. But what's actively happening now is less and less of these applications are being viewed. So, you know, we always like to think about this as in, where can I start? Like, if the employers are going to start looking for people to bring into the role here, why am I going to start at the back end of the funnel where, you know, where we have, you know, 2,000 potential individuals applying for these roles? So, excuse me, I have a tickle. So really what we want to do is, if employers are going to start hiring by looking at internal promotion first, right? Who inside this company can we promote, or can we move laterally to this role that we need to get filled? Okay, if there's no one internally, then I'm going to ask my team, who do you know and who do you trust for this role? And then I'm going to ask my direct network, my family, friends, people I know, who do you know I'm hiring for this particular role? And then I'll work with my recruiter. They're going to have the job ads out there, but all the while, all this stuff is happening behind the scenes. And if you're not hearing back, maybe they are looking at your application, but it's likely that there are other people that are further along in the process just due to the fact that they have an in through a referral, right? And that's where we know that referral and direct contact are the ways to actively start job seeking right now. Especially when there's so much saturation and so much competition in almost every single role that's being put out there, because unemployment is through the roof.
And perfect segue into the first question, right? Which was why, you know, I'm sending out applications. Why aren't employers responding to me? I think that was the question, right? So, okay, so we just gave you some context. So part of it might be just the fact that the market's saturated, right? And that employers may just not have time to get back to you, or your resume went into the black hole of the applicant tracking system, right? That being said, there are absolutely some ways for you to increase the chances that any of your applications through job boards, you know, LinkedIn, Indeed, Simply Hired, Monster, whatever the job board might be, or the company website for that matter, get seen, right? And so, you know, there's a whole body of work within what Eli and I do for a living around making sure that your resume is really optimized and tells a powerful story of the value that you have to offer, right? On the optimization side, you know, it has a bit to do with the applicant tracking systems and making sure you have the right keywords in there and whatnot. That's a whole nother body of work. And quite frankly, there are, you know, many great articles online you can read about how to ATS optimize your resume. Now, Eli and I don't spend a heck of a lot of time when we're coaching people on their resumes. We don't spend a lot of time on the ATS optimization. We spend more time on the branding piece, right? Helping the job seeker put their best foot forward, tell their best, most persuasive story on paper that they can possibly tell, right? So if your applications are not getting any responses, it could be the market. The other possibility is that the story you're trying to tell, your resume may not be as powerful and persuasive as it could be. If they have seen your resume, one of the first things they're going to do is go look at your LinkedIn profile. That's kind of the flow these days, the process. And if your LinkedIn profile is not putting your best foot forward either, that may have something to do with it. And then backing up even further, it's like, okay, professional value, what does that mean? How do I put my best foot forward? And that's a whole another can of worms that we could certainly unpack. And there might be a question about that coming up from one of our viewers today. We'll see.
Cool. We do have another question that kind of goes down a different path. This is from Joe. He asks, what resources do you recommend or offer that can help me find my passions? I'm not happy now with my career, but I don't know where to start in making a switch. Overwhelmed would be a good word.
Got it. Sure. Well, that's from our perspective, that's definitely a loaded question, because that's actually what we do for a living in the Career Strategy Series program. And we're absolutely going to be sharing a bit about that near the end of today's AMA. In terms of, say, some either free or low cost resources out there, number one is, there's this Bible of career development that has been around for decades. A bit of an old school book, but the advice and the tools and the resources within this are more relevant than ever here in 2020 and moving into 2021. So the book is called What Color is Your Parachute? So Joe, I would recommend that you go out there, grab a copy of What Color is Your Parachute. I'd recommend the hard copy versus the e-version. And the reason why is because there's some really phenomenal exercises in the book that you'll want to actually write in the book, take notes in the book and whatnot. So pull out your old school hat, get a hold of that book. Amazing exercises in there having to do with identifying your strengths, your values, really taking stock of some of what makes you tick professionally. And that can give you some insights about what motivates you and which direction you may want to take things. So that's one resource I could recommend. Great.
Additionally, I suppose it's less of a resource and just more of a way of thinking. So a lot of the time, as we start assessing what we're doing and trying to determine whether or not it's aligned with our passions, an important thing to ask is, did we choose to do this because of the external motivators associated with this role, right? Am I doing this because there's a certain level of prestige associated with it? I'm kind of tied into the financial lifestyle associated with the job that I have. Maybe it's, my parents really, really spent a lot of money to send me to school to learn this thing, and I feel really bad not doing this now that all that investment's gone in. Or I myself have spent a lot of time doing it, and people in my field have been validating me, right? When at its core, we need to be asking ourselves, what's giving us energy from inside? And, so much of life is just so focused on getting validation from the outside. Like, we never feel okay unless, this person's pleased with what we're doing, or, we appear to be exceptional at this one thing. And like, from an outsider's view looking in, this, we're the best of the best. But if it doesn't feel that way inside, we're never going to be enough there, right? So that's less of a resource and more of just a question to pose to yourself, right? Like, have I been doing what I'm doing based on my external motivators, or, do I still get some level of energy from the work that I'm doing? And if so, what are those things that have been energizing me the most? What have I liked the most? How can I find other roles that allow me to be in that flow state or in that energy zone a lot more regularly than what I'm actively doing right now, right? So like Peter said, at the end, we'll kind of share a little bit more about our program, which is very focused on answering this particular question. But those are a few places to start.
As you're talking, Eli, the reason why I'm looking over here is because it reminded me of an article I wrote or a post I put on LinkedIn. It really had to do with this idea of job security, right? The question is often, the term job security is kind of passé, right? That's kind of the wrong question. It's not about job security. It's about, I would call it like career relevance. If you can continue to be relevant to employers in the market, you will have a secure future. Okay. And so what makes us relevant, and what makes us confident in that relevance, and that's that self-awareness piece, right? When we're able to, when we know from the bottom of our soul who we are professionally, what our professional value is, what are those things that I'm good at, I enjoy, and I do well, right? And when I get to use those things in my job, in my career, I feel energy, right? Simple question, difficult, challenging to identify sometimes, right? But like the simple questions like that, if you're able to take stock of those things and revisit them on a regular basis throughout your career, and those of you who are with us today who are more senior, you're going to have this whole library of success stories throughout your career, which are going to help you validate that question, right? And help you, I found that my more senior clients have a much stronger sense of kind of career security because they've just have more experience, right? But even when you're younger in your career, earlier in your career, there are ways to identify these patterns. So, it lends itself to, when you have that confidence in your professional value, then you can move forward and be relevant to your target employers, right?
Yeah. Great. So here's an interesting one that's come up. Jolene here has asked, she says, I want to be working in a field or an area that interests me. However, the areas I'm interested in are hospitality, leisure, and travel and tourism, and sports. And, based on 2020 and the pandemic, these industries have really taken a hit. So understanding that, what can I do?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm going to toss it over to you, Eli, because I think you probably have some ideas, but if you think non-COVID, you would think about growth industries and retrenching industries, right? And growth industries are always going to provide more opportunity in terms of job growth and space for you in that field, right? But here we are in COVID, and what was a blossoming industry of travel and tourism and hospitality has taken a pretty brutal hit. It will come back. It may take some time, but it will absolutely come back, right? That's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. And let's unpack this a bit. What are your first thoughts, Eli?
The first thing that comes to mind is, it's like, even though those industries could be what are exciting, right? At the core of it, like, yeah, there might be some perks. If you work for a sports team, then you're going to get to go to the games, right? Or maybe there's some perks associated with working with the travel and tourism and within the hospitality industry. However, what aspects of the role itself that you want to do are the most exciting to you, right? And is that a role, or are those skill sets that you're actively utilizing on a day-to-day basis within that role, within those industries that you'd ideally like to be in, transferable to an industry that may be a little bit more active right now, such as education technology is absolutely booming, fast-moving consumer goods. It just kind of depends on your interest in that space. E-commerce is actually also seeing an uptick. Supply chain logistics as well, because people are having to revamp things. Platforms like online entertainment, whether it's like a Netflix, a Disney Plus, a tool like StreamYard or Zoom or anything like that, right? So there are going to be loads of opportunities there, but we don't want to get hung up on. I really saw myself in this industry. I've always been in this industry, right? I have clients who spent the last 15 years in the same industry, and right now that industry, such as retail, like traditional retail, they're not increasing the amount of jobs. They're reducing by like 60%. So with that in mind, how do I set myself up in another industry that is, like Peter said, a growth industry, while leveraging the transferable skill sets that I've taken the time to learn in the particular role, right? So I'd say let's not get too hung up on the industry and see where we can kind of take the transferable skills, apply them into a growth industry for the time being. And then after you've gained and garnered some new skills and learned a few things in that industry, once things settle back down, you'll be able to pivot back if that's like where you truly feel energized, right?
Yeah, 100%. And don't feel as if, oh, if I transition into a new industry or maybe even a slightly different role where I'm going to take my transferable skills in there and make an impact, don't feel like you're going to, if you make that transition, you're going to be stuck or you're going to be pigeonholed, because I'm sorry, that's just not the case. Eli and I have seen, hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have made all kinds of amazing transitions from one industry to another, and then back again, or from one role to another, and then back again. I mean, I'm not quite sure where this myth came from around being, pigeonholed. We see all kinds of amazing transitions. So, it's about having an open mind. It's about understanding your transferable skills. It's about an abundance mindset. Speaking of criteria for successful career transitions, it's about abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And take a deep breath and realize that 2020 is going to get better. It just is. We see it on the horizon, and we can kind of feel the energy shifting. And that's what Eli and I are seeing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we went live today, I actually had a couple of other questions come through. Let's see. How about, I know I should be networking, but it's really hard since everyone is virtual. What can I do?
Yeah, if I had to talk about the one pain point for all my clients is when we set this action. It's like, okay, we're going to go out and we're going to start reaching out to people of interest from who are actively working in roles at companies that I'm really excited about, or they're really excited about. And we're trying to hype them up to like get to this work. And there is just this massive resistance to take the first step to do the outreach, right? Whether it's that LinkedIn connection request with the nice note and it's personalizing that note, or even better than that, it's a cold email outreach, right? Or sometimes it doesn't even have to be that. It's a really good way to start getting in contact with people and warming them up so you can have like really meaningful conversation is, check out their activity on social media. What are they posting? Share their posts, comment on their posts, comment on something thoughtful, right? Peter, you and I both have this like dissatisfaction when people are just like, hey, I agree, awesome job, thumbs up.
It drives me crazy. I mean, it's an impulse. My impulse is to say, oh yeah, I agree, but I'm so tired of hearing like, oh yes, I agree. Oh, 100%. Like, couldn't agree with you more. What a great point. Let's put a little bit more thought into it, right?
Yeah. When you start putting a little bit more thought into it, people start taking notice. They start noticing you. They click on your profile. They're like, who is this person? That's a really thoughtful comment, especially if it's someone that isn't like an influencer on LinkedIn or Facebook or anything like that. It's someone that you admire in a role that doesn't usually get a lot of attention. So you're going over there. They're getting some attention. They're getting really authentic commentary. And because of that, they start digging into you. They start getting curious about who you are. And then you start warming things up, right? So networking virtually doesn't have to be super, super challenging. It's only as challenging as you make it. Most of my clients get in their own way with this stuff. It's usually comes from this resistance, which stems from something a little bit deeper than, oh, I just, I I don't know if I can budget time for it, or it's coming from a place of fear. Like, you don't want to be rejected, right? And that fear of being rejected or being a nuisance, right? That's some of my clients are like, I don't want to be a nuisance to this person. It's like, it depends what you're asking for. Now, if you're networking, trying to, and Peter, tell me if you've seen this a lot, but if you're networking and just asking them to take a look at your resume, or asking them, hey, I saw this job posting, like, could you refer me in, without having any type of warm connection ahead of time? Okay, then you're a nuisance, straight up. Like, I'm not going to beat around the bush with that. But if you're being thoughtful and you're being sincere and you're like, wow, I really admire this post that you shared and like your perspective on it, and these are my thoughts on it. I'd love to talk to you about it sometime, and see if you could set something up, and genuinely be curious. Like, genuinely be curious about this person and what they do, and what the culture's like, and what they've been working on, and what are some of the challenges they're experiencing, right? So, I think these particular things are ways that you could proactively and effectively start networking virtually, versus, going to meetups and, standing in the corner, eating food, trying not to talk to anybody.
Interestingly, it just prompted me to think of a kind of a networking hack when we do return to in-person networking. And the hack is, if you're the one who's uncomfortable walking into a crowded room and trying to get conversations going, then don't walk into a crowded room. Meaning, be the first person there, and let other people walk into your room. Okay, little networking hack that I've seen help my clients feel more comfortable about the networking situation. With regard to what currently virtual networking, over the past 6 months or so, I'm actually seeing people gaining more traction, getting more conversations through their outreach on LinkedIn and Facebook, and asking professionally, politely for a conversation, and having those conversations on Zoom, on Google Meet, on on whatever platform, on Skype, right? And I haven't put a finger on exactly why they're getting more conversations going. I think it might have something to do that it's an easier commitment than, taking 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, going to a cafe, getting a coffee, meeting face to face, versus, oh yeah, I'll throw you on my calendar. I can jump on the call with you next week, and we'll do a Skype call. Easy, boom, right? It's like, logistically, it just feels easier than putting together a coffee at your favorite cafe. So that's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but I am seeing more traction in the market, and it really comes down to reaching out the most appropriate way, right? And it's not about being annoying; it's about being value add, right? And thinking about, how can I make this person's day? Almost like that. Like, I have some value to add. I have confidence in that value. And this conversation I have, yes, I'm hoping to gain some information. And if all goes super, super well, maybe I'll get an introduction to somebody else. But more importantly, how can I add value to this conversation?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Comment.
You agree, Eli?
Yeah.
100%.
To add just another layer, like, if you want to add a tool in there to kind of help you in winning these meetings, I found it really useful to leverage tools like meetingbird.com or Calendly, right? They have the free versions of these apps. They basically integrate with your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar, right? So if you already have events on there and you want to structure time maybe just on Tuesdays and Thursdays for these meetings, and you want to make it easy for someone to schedule time with you, then you can say, hey, I'd love to chat. It's only going to be 30 minutes. Here's my calendar. Pick a 30-minute slot that works for you. This way you don't have to worry about that back and forth, and you give them an action immediately that they can go and click on. I found that, networking, I'm doing a lot of networking during this pandemic. I think you are as well, Peter. Yeah. And I'm finding when I send my calendar link, usually within 30 minutes to like the next 2 hours, I will have a meeting on my calendar from the people that I've sent that request out to, right? So you don't need to have a consulting practice or anything to get one of these tools. You could just have this be like a personal meeting link. It looks super professional, and it makes it really easy for someone to just connect with you without you having to go do the back and forth. Oh, look at my calendar. These are my dates. These are your times. What times do you have free? Oh, actually, your kid has a doctor's appointment. Okay, what about this? So it just kind of alleviates a lot of the hassle of the booking aspect, and that way you'll get some of the meetings on these books quicker, right?
I agree, Eli. So the extra layer here is about numbers, right? So anybody who's ever been in sales has tracked data around what it takes to get a meeting, right? And how many follow-ups it takes, and so on and so forth. So, Eli and I are also big advocates of understanding that, to be fair, it's a bit of a numbers game when it comes to your outreach. And that's true whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, right? And so, making sure that you don't base your assumption that this virtual networking things doesn't work because I reached out to 3 people and none of them responded to me. Yeah. I'm sorry, but that's a really horrible assumption to make just based on reaching out to 3 people. So what we're recommending is that you need to significantly increase your volume. Number one, you need to reach out the right way with the right messaging. But, increase your volume and be reaching out to like 10, 15, maybe even 20 people a day. Yes, a day, right? And keeping track of who you're reaching out to. And if people don't respond to your first outreach, having a professional, non-threatening second outreach, right? It's a follow-up strategy. Follow-up is a skill that is of high value, which is not very often used in a job search, right? So understanding that's a bit of a numbers game and keeping track of it. And we see the data. We see it all the time with our clients, right? So if you are on this call, on this live, and you're the one who said, yeah, I've reached out to 5 people, no one responded, therefore it doesn't work. I'm sorry, I have to challenge you on that because we see it working all the time with the right volume.
Yeah, and you're looking for numbers. You pick 15 people, 1 out of those 15, you're going to get a response. I've tried it a few times. I've tried this, I've actually done this so many times for myself or for, family members. I have my brother was actively, looking for a job in illustration over at Leica. It's a production company that's done movies like Amelie or Box Trolls, right? And he's a brilliant artist. And like he put together probably the best 11-minute video of his art, his artwork, his story, why he'd be a good fit. It was absolutely brilliant. It was moving. I still keep it and I watch it every so often, right? So he did this. He wrote a cover letter and he sent it in to the HR and he got a response back saying, hey, we think we filled the role. Also, we think that the video is a little bit too long. And no one from the team is going to take the time to watch it. He was fuming. He literally had steam coming out of his ears. He's like, I hate this. I spent all this time, like, screw them. If they don't want to hire me, all this stuff. I was like, okay, all right, cool. That's when you go to HR, right? But the HRs aren't the creatives. They're not going to get to see all the talent hidden behind the work that you did in that video. So he's like, F this, I'm through. I was like, no, you can't be. So I was pissed off, and I was like, this video is too good. Someone needs to see it. So I went and I found about 15 people, illustrators, animators, directors, producers at Leica Studios, and I shot them the same email template, same exact email. I didn't change it, and I included that, his resume and his video link. And within 30 minutes, I sent 15 of these out. Within 30 minutes, I get like the director of illustration or like the head of illustration animation. It's like, wow, this is absolutely brilliant. I would love to talk to your brother. Why don't you have him get in touch with me now that you have my email address? So I let my brother know. Needless to say, he was still pissed off, so he like didn't go through with it. It just goes to show like a little bit of initiative, a little bit of effort, and putting yourself out there. It's like, do not live in ungrounded fear of being rejected. You're never going to achieve what you think you can achieve. If you get overwhelmed by the first no you receive, then and you fail to continue to try, then you've really failed. Failure stops when you continue to try, right? And that's really what it's all about here. You just have to keep pushing forward. And resilience has never been more important than right now.
Every no gets you one step closer to a yes, I think, is what they say in sales, right? Yeah. As well as the sale never really begins until you understand the objections, right? And so a no or silence in some cases is just an objection, right? So the question we want to ask ourselves, if we're thinking from a stance of empowerment, is, okay, I haven't heard back from them. What can I do to follow up with them and remind them of how valuable I am? Some type of positively framed, empowering question like that would be the way to approach it, right? This is the type of stuff that turns job searches into magic, right? This type of proactivity, this type of mindset is what we see working. Do we have time for one more question?
Yeah, we have time for one more, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Let's see. Resume. Okay, there's a question here about resumes.
All right.
There's so much resume advice out there. I don't know who or whose advice or what advice is correct. What top advice, Peter and Eli? You guys have been doing this for a while, so it sounds like you might have some valuable advice to offer on resumes. What can you offer this advice to me to write a really good resume that will get the attention of hiring managers?
Cool. Should we just kind of give our top tip?
Yeah, we could unpack this one for like this AMA, the next one, and the next one after that. So why don't we keep it brief and maybe a couple of top tips.
Yeah. So the biggest and most important thing you could do here is your resume needs to be targeted towards a job that you want, right? So if you just have this blanket resume that you've kind of been keeping updated and you're using it to apply to jobs for like all different types of jobs, that's not going to lead you to the results that you're looking for. You need to really narrow down scope and say, what is it that I'm actively targeting? What's the role type that I want? And ideally, what are the responsibilities I want to be focused on? So you can take job descriptions of roles that you're really interested in. You go plug them into a tool like wordclouds.com just to see what are the top keywords that keep popping up. And then as you see that, make sure that like the role type is listed right on your resume towards the top. And then the keywords that you're utilizing are strewn throughout. So that way the relevance of what it is that you're doing is perceived by the reader for that particular role, and also caught onto by the applicant tracking system if you are doing a lot of online job applications.
My top tip is strategic, not tactical. Okay. And that is ignore the one-page myth. So um, and it just like boggles my mind that this myth has been perpetuated. Even since I got into this business back in 1999, there was this like myth about, oh, a resume should only be one page. Okay. So don't know where it came from. I know from the bottom of my soul that it's not true, right? Meaning like, oh, a resume should always be only one page. Well, what we've come to learn over the years is that while there are, say, a few industries where they do expect a one-page resume, and the industries that come to mind are finance and management consulting. Within management consulting, I know, for example, if you apply for a job at Bain, I think their job portal says we only accept one-page resumes. So they're like, well, that's what we want. We expect you to be brief, sell your value to us in one page. Okay, good. Follow their instructions, right? But on another note, I've had several conversations with other consultants. For example, one that sticks to mind is McKinsey. I was speaking with a consultant at McKinsey in London once, and I actually asked her, I'm like, does McKinsey expect only a one-page resume? She's like, no, 2 pages is fine. Doesn't, as long as you're selling your value, that's all that matters to us. Okay, great. Conversations like that help me understand that the one-page thing is a myth, right? I think it comes through well-meaning advice of family and friends. It's a perpetuated myth. There are some recruiters who will say, my client prefers a one-page resume. My client, meaning the company I'm trying to fill a role for, prefers a one-page resume. And then, next thing you know, that piece of advice goes viral and it turns into this massive myth. What's significantly more important than the length of your resume is how you position yourself on paper, how you position your value, and how you tell your story on paper. That's all that matters. And tell your story and your value in a relevant way, meaning relevant to your targets, right? Your target employers and your target industries, for your target roles and your target geographies. Okay, that's all that matters. I could unpack that further, but I'm gonna.
It's a huge topic, resume writing. So, looks like we have a few more questions, but we're gonna need to wrap it up here.
Okay.
So, what we want to do is just share a little bit more about the program that we talked about, your career strategy, the career strategy series. We had Joe ask about how can you really find your passions, and if you don't know where to start, where can you start, right? So Peter and I have developed this program, and I think Peter's been practicing this particular methodology and this framework for 20 plus years. He was kind enough to mentor me and teach me this approach, and this approach is rooted in 30 plus years of research, tried and tested, right? And it's all focused on identifying your intrinsic career motivators, those things that are subjective and true to you. Because if you know what energizes you, if you know what your strengths are, if you know what your values are, what your interests are, your satisfiers, dissatisfiers, your ideals, right? If you're able to capture all of this information and have a vision in place to know how can I start putting these things in place to over the course of the next year, 5 years to get to my idealistic role, then you can start making a lot of sense as it relates to what step I can take next. So, Peter and I are actively, we're really pumped to be working with our third cohort in the career strategy series that we launched back in May. And, we're supporting people and really doing this introspective work to understand who they are at a core level. And doing like very in-depth exercises. It's a lot of self-reflection and kind of taking things out, doing a lot of group work together to come back and debrief and get 360-degree feedback on the self-reflection. And this program means so much to us because so often, even in our lives, we never really got too much support. The support we did get was really transactional. It was like, hey, maybe if you do your resume like this, then you can get this job. Oh, you think you want this job? Great. Let me show you how to write this good cover letter, right? And all that stuff is important at a certain point in the job search funnel, but most of us haven't even never validated what the hell we even enjoy, right? So, before we even like make the decision on what it is we might want to do next, or even if we're happy in a job right now that we might be considering moving from, well, what does that look like? And the real, the framework that we built really supports people in understanding and making sense of how to actively look at all of these data points and come up with a very clear direction as it relates to that career trajectory. So if you'd like to learn more about that, then feel free to check out www.yourcareerstrategy.com. You can book a free 30-minute coaching and discovery call with Peter and I. There's no obligation. You just book a call. Let us get to know you. Let's hear about what career challenges you're going through, right? That's what we're here for. We do this not because we're like looking for ways to plug our program and this, that, and the other thing. We know our program helps people, and it helps people really achieve their desired outcomes over the long term. But more than that, if we can help you resolve something immediately in those 30 minutes, that's what we're going to use those 30 minutes for, right? Peter, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I was just reflecting on the fact that we're in our third cohort, and that despite 2020, we've been able to positively impact some the lives of the individuals in these cohorts. Fantastic program. We're having a blast delivering it. We're having a blast adding value to people's careers and their career decision making. So as Eli mentioned, if there's something like this sounds interesting to you, visit our landing page at yourcareerstrategy.com. There you can book a discovery call. You're going to get connected with either Eli or myself for 30 minutes. It's no obligation, and we're not selling the program on the call. We're happy to answer questions about it. We do share a bit about how the program is structured, but we're mainly trying to figure out in those 30 minutes, how can we help you with, maybe one sticking point where you have a question or where you've been struggling. So we welcome your outreach, and we hope we have a chance to speak with you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bhavik. Thank you, Kristen and Anoop and Mansoor and Kiana and Joe and Caesar and Evan and all of you who joined us here and commented really positive things and asked really great questions. We look forward to joining you again in a very short time frame, maybe next week. And if you have more questions or you've had time to think about them, bring them. We're here to answer whatever you have on your mind.
I agree.
All right.
Thanks, Eli.
Peace out.
Take care, everybody. Be well.